Kia ora koutou katoa. This weekend we joined with members of St. Luke's tramping group to celebrate their 50th golden anniversary. Enjoyed reading Ellen Davidson's account of their history with many photos and memories. The genesis of the group was that Mari and Malcolm Thomas had booked to hike what we now call a great walk, and to get fit planned to go walking after the church service. They invited others to join them, which they did. In time, this led to annual camps. Right from early on, the group attracted both members of St. Luke's and those who didn't have that affiliation. Ellen's account underlines both the engagement with the outdoors, particularly the wild places in the bush, and the engagement with one another, fellowship, friendship, and fun. These two Holy Spirits were today being Pentecost Sunday, the Holy Spirits of connection with nature and camaraderie with others. They combine to make this group what it is. Our first reading today is from Mary Oliver, and it's called Storage. And I don't have it printed in front of me. Now located it. Mary writes, "When I moved from one house to another, there were many things I had no room for. What does one do? I rented a storage space and filled it. Years passed. Occasionally I went there and looked in, but nothing happened, not a single twinge of the heart. As it grew older, the things I cared about grew fewer and were more important. So one day I undid the lock and called the trash man. He took everything. I felt like the little donkey when his burden is finally lifted. Things. Burn them, burn them. Make a beautiful fire. More room for your heart, for love, for the trees, for the birds who own nothing, the reason they can fly." This poem begins in the world of things and possessions and moving house, sorting, knowing there are things we should throw out but don't. So in Mary's case, she rents a storage space, which I suppose is better than living cluttered and not feeling the space in your new home as room. Room for your body, room for your soul. Of course, many of us in New Zealand use our garages rather than rent space. Cars live in the driveway in many places in this country. We can identify with this. Accumulation is an ailment all too common. Some, of course, find great comfort in it, surrounded by the memories that things evoke. Some possessions have been acquired for all the right reasons, the needs of the household, including our need to have at least a few things of beauty that give us pleasure. But some possessions outlive our needs, just hang around, even weigh us down. We understand the sentiments in Mary's last stanza of taking off, even burning, this burden of things, in order to find more freedom, more room for the heart. Yet living with possessions, the good and the bad of it, is our modern lot. And divest as we may, our souls still need to find ways to cope with the little or loads that are left. Leaving it all behind, shutting the door on it, putting on the hiking boots, and heading out even for a few hours is a time-honoured and religion-honoured way of coping with accumulation. The word retreat seems apt. Though sitting in a freezing Avian trying to pray is not, of course, what I had in mind. Rather going and connecting with that great abbey of God called the outdoors. It's about taking what you need, limited by the fact that you'll have to carry it. Taking your need for quiet from the voices of demand and the traffic of modern devices. Taking your need for the sounds of bush and streams and wind and rain and the smells of the same. Going with a friend or friends for safety, for company. Going where there's space to walk alone or in silent togetherness or with companionable talk. Going for the sake of your body and soul. There are other ways of dealing with, living with possessions and their demands. But walking out is a good one. Even walking out, as many have done, with a pack on your back for a few days or more. I sometimes think such multi-day hikes are a spiritual exercise, reminding us of how few things we actually need to live an enjoyable life. Then there is a realization, once you're out there, of this great natural world and all its beauty, and that we are a part of it, connected to it, entangled in it. And gratitude arises. So does our sense of responsibility towards it. Human activity is the greatest threat to the natural world, and a different type of human activity, which we called conservation, is one of the best pathways to ensuring its survival. So, to members of St. Luke's Tramping Group, thank you for continuing this great tradition, spiritual habit of monthly walks and annual camps for 50 years. These activities have nurtured the bodies and souls of members of this congregation and numerous others. Thank you too to those over the years and still today who offer leadership and commitment to the many tasks of making it all happen. The book we know of as the Acts of the Apostles has, in the last 2 decades, been redated as early 2nd century CE. It was crafted to support a thesis that the good news of Jesus, beginning in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, spread throughout the whole known world in an orderly fashion, led by male apostles and accountable to a council in Jerusalem. That thesis created a myth of unity and order. Whereas other documents, like the letters of St. Paul written some 50 plus years earlier, point to a more spontaneous and anarchic development of Jesus groups, with male and female apostles, who do not all think or act the same. Nowadays, scholars tell us the followers of Jesus never all thought and acted the same. There never was an original unity in the Jesus movements. Similarly, the idea that Jesus, after suffering a slave's death of crucifixion, walked the earth in a new body for 40 days, then ascended into the clouds, before 10 days later descending on 120 followers as spirited fire and wind, is too part of the myth making. John's Gospel, for an alternative example, has the new revivified body of Jesus breathing out that spirit upon the followers, the frightened followers. So no waiting for 50 days, no fire, no wind, save his breath. John too is an early 2nd century creation and is also into myth making, but a different myth than the book of Acts. The earliest Gospels we have, Mark and Thomas, have none of this timeline, a body ascending or a spirit descending. Mark ends with the fear of violence and the absence of Jesus' body. Thomas is a sayings gospel like the book of Proverbs, and it didn't make the canonical cut to be in the New Testament. So my first point is that Pentecost was and always is about myth and imagery. The history, the little that might be gleaned, is that Jesus' followers in fear, grief and confusion ran away, and then, probably over some years, came together, formed communities, remembered Jesus together, felt his presence, his spirit with them, and revisited events in the light of their Hebrew scriptures in order to understand them. It was his followers who were resurrected, restored, re-energized. The movement was brought back to life. And Jesus' Spirit, also known as the Holy Spirit, was thought of as an animator, a memory aid, a comforter, a spur to action. Another part of the Acts of the Apostles myth-making, not quite as pictorial as the flames of fire, was the depiction of the first Jesus group or community in Jerusalem. This is found in Acts 2, 43 to 47. In this passage, the believers are said to be communitarian, having all things in common and selling their possessions and distributing the proceeds to all, as any have need. While scholars of the book point out that other Jesus groups had other social practices and policies, and the communitarianism portrayed in this text might not have an historical basis, there is no escaping that the mythic ideal that the author was creating was one of firstly being unhitched from the desire to accumulate possessions, and secondly being committed to prioritizing the ones most in need, whether part of your biological family or class or race or not. This was very countercultural, then and now. In terms of spirituality, such a reorientation was seen as transcending desire and freeing the members of that community from the grind of their individual needs. As Mary Oliver says, like with birds, when we own nothing, we can fly. Such freedom, though, like with owning nothing, is difficult to attain and then maintain. So my second point is that, as did the author of Acts, we need to make myths, ideals, about what community and societal life should be like, rather than simply accept the rules and norms of our nation, often rules and norms that explicitly or implicitly benefit the most powerful. We need to envision what a common good would look like, a common good that leaves no one behind, and how we would attain it and then maintain it. It is to such an ideal that the Spirit of Pentecost calls us. The Holy Spirit, following the Hebrew tradition, was often figured as a bird. Genesis 1:2, God's Spirit, Ruach, is described as hovering over the waters, awaiting the beginning of life. This is often understood in the Talmud as a dove hovering. In the Noah story, it is a dove that is sent forth and returns with an olive branch, symbolizing the peace of a new covenanted relationship between God and humanity. It's probable that the gospel writers took this dove imagery of new beginnings and applied it to the baptism of Jesus. The message there being that Jesus was the new beginning, the new covenant between God and humanity. The writers of the Talmud, though, did not restrict the Spirit to just one type of bird. Deuteronomy 32:11 likens God's nurturing care to a mother eagle with her young. And then in the Elijah saga, there are ravens that provide him with food. And, fun fact, there is reference to an ostrich. It's a good trivial question. In Job 39:13, with a very contemporary message, namely finding joy in accepting yourself as you are, with all your limitations, like not being able to fly, like an ostrich. My third and last point is that in thinking about spirit, I invite you to, like our ancestors did, consider the birds. This coming Sunday, in the PowerPoint slides, I'll show a stylized wild goose from Scotland, and then from Aotearoa, a kutuku, a kaha, a welcome swallow called a waru, pied stilts, poaka, a bare-tailed godwit, a kuaka, a tui, a New Zealand falcon, also known as camaraderie, a kia, a tomtit, also known as a miru, and lastly another kia. Birds offer us a picture of grace, the grandeur of their flight, the joy of their song. They offer us beauty, not least in the intricacy of their feathers. They have the ability to be part of our everydays. Birds also offer to us ways of going about the planet that are different to ours, and creating joy in us as they do. All these attributes, and thank you, Catherine Jones, for your thoughts on this. These attributes of grace, beauty, connection, perspective, make them the obvious image for the Spirit. Talking of perspective, you may wonder why there are lecterns in some churches shaped like an eagle. Well, it's got nothing to do with the Roman or American empires. The eagle is a symbol of St. John. It's a symbol about a vision, seeing a long way, getting a new and long-range perspective, which is also an attribute of the Holy Spirit. Blessings to you this week.